Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, or Mr. Happy Mondays, whatever you prefer. It's a weekly Q&A show that I've been doing now. This is episode 14, and I've been loving every episode of it. Basically, I go back and I look at the previous episode comments, and I try my best to answer as many questions as possible, so you guys can pick my brain, whether it's about Final Fantasy XIV, Destiny, my opinion on other MMOs on the market, whatever your question is, I pick them, I answer them. So without further ado, let's get into episode 14's questions, shall we? So the first question is a beginner question, something I don't really get too often anymore. Hey Mr. Happy, what is the easiest beginner class / jobs? And do you have any good tips for a newbie? That's completely subjective depending on what you like to play. Paladin is probably the easier to learn of the two tanks, but from 30 to 40, it could be really rough on new tanks. I'd have to give you like exact tips, use flash 3 times at least on every pull. Make sure you mark your targets, things like that. Black Mage and Bard are two pretty easy DPS. I'd argue Bard is easier, only because I've seen a lot of Black Mages that don't really understand Astral Fire and Umbral Ice, and their damage is really, really low, and on some of the later dungeons, that can be an issue. So I'd argue Bard. Rogue is also pretty easy, but Ninja gets a little bit more complex, only because of the ninjutsu. It really doesn't pick up its complexity until you get your third Mudra. So yeah, those are all pretty easy clash and jobs, and just a tip, be willing, if people try to offer you advice nicely, like they're like, hey man, listen, just so you know, if you do this instead of this, it'll, bump up your damage a little bit. If they're being nice about it, they're like, yo, you could scrub, what the f are you doing? Ignore them. But always be willing to learn and take advice. Every job has its little quirks, has its little things that if you're a brand new player, especially new to MMOs, that you got to pick up, as you go along. Be receptive to those things, read your abilities, understand how they work, and try and figure them out. And if people have advice, look at it, take it, test it, see how it feels, and that is really my best advice to any new player. And now on the opposite head of the coin, opposite side of the coin, we have a question about turn 13, because I just posted a kill video yesterday. So I just watched your turn 13 video and have questions that seem to be brought up a lot for my static and as a job choice. My group's composition is the same as yours, except me. I go in as a Black Mage who have no Summoner or any other caster. How do you think Black Mage compares to Summoner in the final coil of Bahamut? I've watched a lot of groups and have not seen one bring Black Mage. Well, then you didn't watch Death and Taxes, the world third group that beat it. They were 1 Monk, 2 Bard, and 1 Black Mage, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Black Mage is actually really good. Your utility in the final coil is a lot more useful than people will make it out to be. A Pocket of Stasis, there's a lot of targeted magic damage that can really help. Mana Wall is great, especially in turn 13 for one of the mechanics. Mana Ward also, turn 13, great tool. It's also really good in some of the other bosses as well. You actually are very, very durable for your job, and that's actually a very, very big deal. You pretty much need vitality accessories on all the jobs if you're going to do the final coil of Bahamut turn 12 and turn 13, unless you have like a bunch of 120 left side gear or some augmented ironworks here. As long as you're still rocking full 110 on the left side, you pretty much need at least like 2 vitality accessories depending on your job, or 2 accessories melded with vitality. But Black Mage's utility is very, very useful. Yes, Summoner has Virus. Yes, Summoner has Eye for an Eye, but I mean, that's not to say that Black Mage is any worse off. I'd argue Mana Wall and a Pocket of Stasis are 2 pretty much equivalent things that you can use. So you'll be fine. It's just a matter of learning the fights so that you can maximize your DPS. Alright, the next question is a very simple one to answer. I've answered in another video, just not a weekly question, weekly Q&A video. Hey Mr. Happy, do you think that gathering and crafting classes will also have their level increased to 60 in the new expansion? Yeah, they confirmed that at the North American Fan Festival, that Disciples of Hand and Land would also be getting a level cap increase to 60. Take that however you want, whether you like it or hate it, but that is the question to your answer. That is the answer to your question. I'm leaving that in. Let's move on. Alright, and this next question, I feel like Naoki Yoshida would be better suited to answer it. Hey Mr. Happy, why do you think it is that Naoki Yoshida and company are treated like rock stars compared to other developers? I got my own theories, but I would like to hear your thoughts on this as well. I mean, you take a game that almost destroyed a company and you turn it around and make it profitable, yeah, you're going to get treated like a rock star, whether you're another developer. People who don't even play Final Fantasy XIV appreciate that he at least went out, that he did it. That he took a game that was a complete failure, turned it around, and made it a success. So that's it. I think that's really all it takes to be considered a rock star as a game developer, and that's why when he did his speech at GDC, I believe it's called, the developers conference, people loved it, because talking to somebody who took a failed game and fixed it and made it better and made it profitable, that's something that developers definitely want more insight on. So I think that's all it really took. And he kind of looks like a Japanese rock star a little bit. Now, this question, I haven't even read this person's first question, but they're saying they have a second question. Actually, I have a second question. Barring adding elemental weaknesses to the game, how do you think Square Enix can make all Summoner Eggies viable? Right now, it's just everyone using Garuda, and when new Eggies come out, I'm sure only the highest level one will be used. Really, it's not as bad as you make it sound. Titan, yeah, he's always going to fall to the wayside. He had his one chance with Ramuh Extreme, and they blew that out of the water. But for when you're doing content and you're first learning it and the fights are lasting, you know, like 9, 10, 11, 13, 14 minutes, Garuda will always be superior for the sole reason that she's saving you MP. It's not because she's improving your damage more than Ifrit's, it's because she's saving you MP. With every contagion that she does, you're having a lot of MP saved. On top of that, Ifrit is also not as good in terms of mobility. Contagion allows you to be a little bit more mobile. I don't have to reapply my dots. I can take this time to move and maybe use a Ruin 2 while I'm moving, try to get a Ruin 1 off and then move, you know, things like that. Not really a big summoner, but I know that you don't spam Ruin 2. That's a bad thing to do. But Ifrit is a little bit more popular after you've overgeared content, when fights are significantly shorter and MP and moving around aren't as big of an issue. Ifrit does more DPS than Garuda, but Garuda pads their master's DPS. So if you're using things like Poison Potions and Miasma 2, along with your Contagion, it's a lot more effective because of how much MP it's saving you, so you don't need to recast those abilities, including your regular dots as often. So I'd say they're about equal, just Garuda's better for progression. Ifrit's good after you've completely overgeared a piece of content, but you could still use Garuda there and have no problems at all. It's barely a difference. They're pretty equal in that case. But they could do it. They could balance it out. They could make some have higher potencies. There need to be trade-offs, though. There need to be meaningful trade-offs. And the trade-off between Garuda and Ifrit right now is really hard to justify bringing Ifrit unless you're really, really confident in your skill on a particular fight. Like, I've seen him on 6 and 8, but I never see him on 7. I never see him on turn 9. So it just really depends on the fight, how much MP you're going to be using, etc., etc. Moving on, that's my answer to the question. We'll see how they balance it out in the future. Here's a question about Final Fantasy XI. I don't get these very often anymore either, now that I just have put that game away for life. So ideally I'll have my gaming rig soon, and with it is one of the games I want to play often is Final Fantasy XI. I've been told to join Asura, that probably is the Reddit server if I had to guess, so I probably will, but will I be able to do all the content in the game? I don't know how the soloing thing works, and I'd ideally like to find a free company, or whatever 11's equivalent is, as soon as I can. Even so, if no one happens to be on willing to lend a hand, what percentage of the game's content dungeon fights can be done by myself? I'd like some challenge to everything, but I don't want to have to grind a 99 to solo a level 50 dungeon, for example. Well, unless you're vastly over leveled to something, yeah, soloing it could be a little bit rough. It depends. Mostly level 75 is good enough to solo most of the really old content until you get to things like Dynamis and Limbus. That you probably want to be 99, but it literally takes like 4 hours to get from 1 to 99. It depends on how well you know the game. Basically, it's get from 1 to 30 and then get carried from 30 to 99. And getting carried from 30 to 99 is a pretty quick process compared to the old leveling ways of 11. The free company equivalent is a link shell, and I believe if Asura is the Reddit server, which I don't know if it is, I'm just guessing if you were told to join Asura, then you should be able to find groups pretty easily. You could pretty much solo everything that's not like Seekers of Adulin. Like, there's level 99 revamps of a lot of the content, those you can't solo. There's Delves, there's Legion you pretty much can't solo either, but there's a lot of things that you can solo. You can work on your Relic entirely solo, as boring as it is. You can work on your Mythic. You need a group for certain things in your Mythic. You absolutely need them. You don't need a full group of 6, I think, except for one specific part. Don't take my word on that. It's been a while, and I didn't solo those things, but there's a lot of things that you could solo. The story missions you can solo. Every story mission, pretty much, you can solo, except for Seekers of Adulin story missions. Yeah, you can solo a lot. You could get a lot done, so I wouldn't worry too much. And if Asura is a populated server, then you should be able to find people at any point of the day. Alright, here's a role-playing question. I didn't expect to get one of these. Hey, Happy, what is your opinion on RP role-playing? I mean, I don't really have an opinion on it. I mean, if it's something that people do, they like to do it. I mean, that's what makes them happy. That's what they do. I am not a role player myself, so it's just not something that I comprehend or understand the allure of it, but that's just me. You know, there's nothing wrong with role-playing, it's just not something that I understand or do. So that's my opinion on it. If that's how they want to play the game, that's how they want to play the game. Or whether it's this game or any other game, role players, that's how they have fun. Let them have fun. That's what I say. This next question is interesting, and I think I'm going to have to answer it in 2 different ways because I don't really know what the question is particularly entailing. Mrhappy, with the holidays coming up, I figured this would be a good question to ask. How do you explain Final Fantasy XIV to friends and family who are not into MMOs in the shortest and best way possible? Also, what color Subblegar looks best on Rogan? I'm colorblind. Why would you even ask that question? So, I don't know if that question is asking, like, people like, oh, what do you do as a hobby, or what do you do for fun? And you want to explain to them, oh, well, I play this game called Final Fantasy XIV. It's an MMO, and it means I just play with other people. Or if you're literally trying to sell them into the game, like, yo, you got to play this game that I play, Final Fantasy XIV. Yo, it's this, it's got this, it's got this. I don't know which way you want it. I'm assuming you just want to explain like what you do as a hobby. For that, I would just say, well, it's an online game. You play it with other people, and you go around, and your goal is to try and save the world. You know, you kill monsters out in the world. There's bad guys that you have to take down as well. There's protagonists, antagonists. Just basically just explain to them that it's basically like a story, but you play it and it's online. I know that's a really crappy way of explaining it, and it's just that if somebody has no inkling of gaming experience, it's impossible to like really make them interested in it unless it's like they're really into like space, like you know, space fiction, and you're playing like a Star Wars MMO and they know a lot about Star Wars. Like, that's different. Unless they have some sort of connection to gaming or Final Fantasy or MMOs, it's going to be really hard to explain. If you're trying to sell it to friends, I mean, you don't just tell them to try the free trial. There's not really much you can do. You can explain to them if they're familiar with earlier Final Fantasies, you know, what kind of bosses there are, you know, point out things from the earlier Final Fantasies like the Magitech Mountain, the Crystal Tower. It's not easy, but those are really the best answers I can come up with. Just give them a really high-level explanation that is just so unspecific you could say it about really any MMO, and that's the best way I could think to explain it to them in the shortest and best way possible. I found that person's first question. I have a question for the next video. Do you think Square Enix should make it so we can link achievements? I think it would help with Party Finder for parties and kill experience only requirements. Yeah, it would make them a lot more prevalent. So, I mean, yeah, they could do it. I think that I remember that being a really bad thing in World of Warcraft when that first became a thing, like, oh, link your achievement. Whoops. Well, can't lie to this group. They're just going to look me up on the internet. And technically, you could do the same thing right now. It's just, yeah, they could do it, and it might help a little bit with those specific things. It just might also hurt the other people. But I've always been a proponent of, if it helps one group and hurts the other, you know, you're gonna have to take a fall. Not everyone's gonna agree on everything you add to your game. So yeah, I mean, sure, why not? They could do it. And another role-playing question. All of a sudden, getting role-playing questions. You guys come here together. Mrhappy, do you have any ideas about making a character on Balmung, the RP server? It would be great to see how you roleplay. Again, I don't roleplay, so you would basically see somebody just be like, how do you do today, milady? And it would be mad awkward. You'd be like, all right, you can leave now. You can get off our server now. So no, I don't have any plans on doing that, and for good reason, in case you couldn't tell. So this is a question, I guess it's a follow-up to my answer. Last week, people were asking why I left Sargatanis and why I left the Legacy Free Company, and I said that our goals didn't align. You know, I didn't feel like they wanted to push themselves to be better and to constantly improve, and they were kind of just settling for their place, and I wanted to keep improving my game, and I wanted to keep pushing against the hardest bosses and killing them as soon as possible. And this person says, so none of your goals happen to be more subs and more views. Isn't that part of the reason you left? Not really. I mean, yeah, it's probably going to be a side effect because I'm able to make more content over with Death and Taxes, but it's not the sole reason I left. You got to remember, it is a video game first and foremost, and if I don't feel like I'm having fun with the group of people that I'm playing with, then I got to look for a group of people that I will have fun playing with. And the group that I have now in Death and Taxes, a lot of fun, a lot of good personalities in there. We could joke around in between pulls. It's not full serious mode, but at the same time, when things get down to it, 100% serious. Except in the transition phase of turn 13, where our bard, our leader, always tells us to turn our UI off and take a screenshot, and then if we don't do it, he's not gonna be happy with us. But we know how to have fun, and that is really the most important thing. It is a video game, first and foremost. Why Why was this marked as spam? I'm looking at this question and it says it was marked as spam, and I know who this is. Hermes, your question was marked as spam. What are you doing? Probably because you have commas and periods. I don't know. Hi, Happy. Question to episode 14. If you had to pick a Final Fantasy 14 job to be in real life, what would it be? A ninja. Because those are in real life. I could be a ninja in real life. I believe. I could just parkour all over the place and then be LOL Nin and die. Okay, so yeah, that's the question. I would be a ninja. I think that would, excuse me, probably be the easiest one to be. Actually, being a warrior, I could just pick up an axe and just swing it around, but people might look at me funny. I'll be a ninja. I'll go with a ninja. I like that one best. Alright. I like this person's question. Funny question, they say. If you were a professional cosplayer and had all the resources to make yourself the perfect costume, what Final Fantasy 14 character or class would you be? Okay, if you had said what Final Fantasy 14, just, yeah. What Final Fantasy universe character would you be? First of all, I'd stick to 14 because, I don't know. I don't really, like, look at me. I can't, like, this doesn't equate to anything. This is what bad, like, Final Fantasy 7 and 8 cosplays are made out of, is this face right here. That is what this face can accomplish. I would realistically probably want to be, like, a Dark Knight or something like that. Not Cecil, but, like a real, like the Final Fantasy 14 image of the Dark Knight with the greatsword. That would probably be pretty cool. It's a little generic. It could probably be interpreted as anything. Like, people wouldn't be like, oh, you're a Dark Knight, unless they played Final Fantasy 14. Or if I dressed up like the Final Fantasy 11 Dark Knight, same deal. But yeah, I think I'd go with that. I think I'd go with the Dark Knight because it's a lot of heavy, you know, metal armor. I'd imagine that would be something you'd need a lot of resources for. And I would not go half-assed. I want a real sword too. I don't want it made out of tinfoil. I want that made out of pure steel, grinded against the rocks and everything. Like you said, any resource. So I'm making use of it. Well, here's a very simple question to answer. Do you think Samurai will have a chance to happen at 3.0? Nope. Yoshi P said, no, Samurai will not be appearing in patch 3.0. They're going to keep monitoring the demand for it and implement it sometime in the future. So, sorry to say that, but the good news is he might make it a DPS. They originally wanted to make Samurai a tank, but Yoshi P feels it's better off as a DPS, so there's hope. There's hope it might be a DPS. There's also hope it might be a tank, but there's also hope it might be a DPS. Alright, so this is a question about somebody who's having trouble staying motivated to keep playing the game. After level 50 gets boring, the only shit you do is get tomestones, is doing the same Dungeons Primal boss fight binding coil over and over and over and over again. Got any tips for me? So I'm having thoughts about just canceling my subscription. The game is totally cool, but not at this point in the game. Got any tips for me? Make friends. That is, I know that sounds like a really dickish response, but if you don't have fun people to play the game with, I mean, any MMO will feel that way. If you try to go into it just solo and just pick up group everything, it really, it takes like a whole degree out of the game, of fun out of the game if you try and do that. So as long as you're having fun, you learn to do things like you level your crafters and gatherers, you know, you try to make money, you try to work the market, you try and get the best melds out of the way, that's why I like progression groups, because it's something to do very, very often. It's something to really work towards, to strive for. Look for a group that's doing more progression-based things. No, don't just do the first and second coil. It sounds like you might be somebody who's suited to go for the third coil of Bahamut, to work on the final coil of Bahamut and really learn the fights and beat them with a different group. Also, gearing up multiple jobs, not just sticking to one. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of ways that you can enhance the gaming experience, but it's ultimately down to how you want to play. And if you don't want to do those things, then yeah, it's going to get boring real quick, because you're narrowing yourself down to like one job and only the content that you can currently beat, and you're not looking at the other things that you could be doing, like hunts and treasure maps and gathering and crafting and making money, housing and things like that. Like, there are a lot of things out there, you just have to want to do them, is the biggest thing. So that's my real tip. It's either find people that you enjoy playing with, because even if you're doing the same thing over and over again, they can make it a lot more fun. And or just be willing to do different things like crafting and gathering and housing and treasure maps and things like that. So I know, I'm sorry I sounded like a dick with the get some friends in the game, but that is honestly like the real way to go about it. If you have friends to play with in the game, it is substantially better. Man, you guys have just been going nuts with questions. I remember for a few weeks ago, I was having to, like, I was forced to look at old videos to find questions. But now you guys are asking them like crazy. I can't even keep up with all of them. Alright, well, I'm just gonna keep answering questions and see how far I can go. Mr. Happy, question for next week. I've been trying almost a year now to get my girlfriend to make a character and play Final Fantasy 14 with me. I see a lot of couples playing together and it looks awesome. What can I do to convince her to give the game a try? I mean, just say do it for me. Just say that one time, you know, can you just do it for me? Just try it out. If you don't like it, I'll leave you alone about it. Offer them the ability to get out of you trying to get them into it. That is probably the best way to do it. Is like, listen, if you just try it out and if you don't like it, I won't bother you about it anymore. I just want to see if we can have some fun together and play this together and enjoy it together. And if you put it like that, she might give it a shot. She might like it. She might hate it. But she'll at least give it a try and you can, you know, stop harassing her about it. That's my best advice for you in that case. And that had 1 like. So somebody else is wondering the same thing. Alright, and the next question, what advice would you have for someone who stopped playing A Realm Reborn in January and recently came back to get back up to gear speed? Farm Sultry, doing the high-level roulette, do all your main story missions, do any hunts, if you can ever find any hunts, to do those, use the allied seals, use the soldiery and the poetics that you get from it to buy new gear. It's really about, if you're behind in gear, farming tomestones is usually the fastest way to do it, whether that be through dungeons, the hunt, whatever, it is usually the fastest way to catch up. Also, do the main story, beat the Circus Tower, beat Labyrinth of the Ancients if you hadn't beat it already, beat all of the primals that you need to beat in order to progress onto the new extreme primals. It'll really come down to doing all of those things, and those are definitely the best ways to start working on gearing up your character. It's a lot quicker than you might believe. As for your crafting, unless you're rich, you're going to be pretty far behind on those melds, because the melds are really what makes catching up on crafting pretty hard. Also, make sure you're leveling all your other crafters, because if you don't have that, it's going to be impossible for you to catch up without all your other crafters leveled, so you're really going to want that, trust me. Here is just a flat-out statement that I want to address. I don't understand why people keep calling for a Dragoon buff. Think about this. With a Dragoon buff, there will be absolutely no reason to ever use a Monk for anything. Monk works hard for its DPS. Dragoon and Ninjas do their rotation and pop cooldowns, and do massive bursts, and Ninjas both burst and sustain. Monk cannot keep stacks on disconnects, and has to constantly maintain those stacks to keep its DPS up. Nin is what fucked up the balance, not Monk. Dragoon was the burst, and Monk was the sustain. Then comes Nin, and they have both. If anything needs to be changed, it's Nin. They need a nerf badly. Free Grease Lightning 3 and plus 20% attack is just stupid. I hate to say, but you don't really know how those jobs work if you think that Dragoon was the burst and Monk was the sustain. That was the conceptual idea behind them. The thing is, Monk had better burst than Dragoon. Unless an enemy would literally die in 2 global cooldowns, a Monk has better burst than a Dragoon. A Dragoon has life surge and their jumps, whereas a Monk can basically get an extra attack off every 5 GCDs. If something's alive for 10 seconds, odds are a Monk is going to do more damage than a Dragoon. But of course, that completely depends on player skill. Ninja didn't really mess up any of the balance, because Monk still does more overall DPS than a Ninja does. And a Ninja's burst damage really only comes once every minute to 2 minutes. Raiton isn't a lot of burst damage without Kasatsu, or unless it gets a lucky crit. And same with Trick Attack. Trick Attack's what, like, it's 1100, like 1200 in a 115 weapon without a crit. So yeah, I mean, really. And Dragoon also, they do not just pop cooldowns to do their rotation. If you have not played a Dragoon if you think that's how it works, because Dragoon's got to work for that DPS. If they at any point miss a heavy thrust, it's not. If the boss turns, they have to memorize boss. It's bad. Like, you're simplifying it way past the point where it's simplified. Nin didn't mess up any of the balance. All Ninja did was give you a third choice, and now Dragoons were absolutely not a viable choice. Dragoon, if they're going to make it a really high DPS, it needs to bring no utility. If it's going to be better than Monk, it needs to have no utility. If they give it utility and make it equal to Monk, then it's going to depend on what that utility is. Monk's Dragon Kick is probably the single best thing in the game in terms of mitigation, other than like a Sacred Soil. Any boss that does magic damage to the raid, and that like they cast an attack like Twintanya's Fireball, or what's another good example? Oh, God, I'm having trouble coming up with good examples. Well, turn 13 is a super big example of a Monk being super good. Turn 11, turn 10, all those places, like being able to get that reduced int or that plus 25% healing is massive. And a good Monk can keep their Grease Lightning stacks up pretty much in any situation outside of a few things. So it takes practice, yeah, but I think Dragoon just needs to be brought up to everybody else's level. So basically what you're saying is with a Dragoon buff, there'd be no reason to ever use Monk. You don't want to bring things down. You don't want to nerf things. You want to bring everything up. If you nerfed a Monk down to Dragoon's level, people wouldn't bring Monk or Dragoon. that would be the problem. They would bring Ninja. If you brought Ninja down too, people would be like, oh, we have to bring one, but we'll bring a Monk because Monk has Dragon Kick and it has Mantra. So you really need to come up with a balancing act that fits all of these things into a singular job. You know, it either needs to be super high damage and no utility, or it needs to be, you know, high damage and some utility, which is what Monk and Ninja do right now. And Dragoon has no utility and they do lower damage. So they either need a utility buff and a little bit of a damage buff, or they just need a massive damage buff and zero utility added to them. And that'll pretty much be what separates them from the other two melee DD jobs. It's a difficult job maintaining balance between three jobs, and this patch has really shown that. But don't act like Monk and Ninja or Ninja and Dragoon are just these super easy, anyone can do a jobs. Dragoon especially, you shouldn't act like that because they have it pretty rough at a lot of times. Alright, I'm just going to do 3 more questions. I haven't picked which 3 questions yet, but I'm just going to do 3 more because this video is running on a little bit long and I have other things to work on today. So, apologies if your question doesn't get answered. Just ask it on next week's video. I'm just going to start telling people, just ask it on next week's video. I apologize if I didn't get to it last week. Just make note that it's a question from the previous week and that you'd like to see it answered, and I can make those a priority. So, apologies, I should have done that a while ago. Alright, so actually here's the first of the 3 questions. I love your glasses. Could you tell me where you bought them? I'll do 3 questions after this because this is an easy one. These are Gunners. You can buy them at a Best Buy, you can buy them online. You can get prescription versions of them, and they are strictly, these are not prescription. These don't help my sight at all. They just protect my eyes from, you know, looking at computer screen all day. It's for the health, it's for my eyes' health. So that should answer your question adequately. Alright, so first of the 3 questions that I'm going to end this video with. Hi, Mr. Happy. A lot of people say that spell and skill speed are useless for most jobs, other than Black Mage. And I wish they could be more useful. So how do you think they can improve and change the stats? It's so simple. Make skill and spell speed, make dots tick faster, reduce the amount of time, like if it's 18 seconds on a dot and you have like 20% spell speed, it should be brought down. The amount of time it lasts on the enemy should be brought down by 20%. And the dot should tick the same amount of times. To do that, they have to change the way dot tick timers work, which I hope they do anyway. It might be a PS3, it might be something related to the PS3, why they haven't yet. And also make skill speed affect your auto attack timers, and same thing, dots. Like, if skill speed affected auto attack timer, it would be an amazing stat. I will tell you that right now. If it did that and affected dot timers, it would be amazing. I remember how big of a stat haste was in World of Warcraft once you hit other thresholds on other stats. So yeah, that's all they would really have to do to make skill and spell speed useful. It's just a matter of how do they do that and maintain balance, because some jobs would benefit a lot from skill speed and they would probably have to have their ability potencies nerfed because of skill speed. It would make balancing a lot harder, but it is something I agree that they should do. Alright, and here's a Destiny question. You guys know I love Destiny questions. Question for next week regarding Destiny. Now that they've released a content list for the first DLC, do you feel any of it towards fixing any of the issues with the initial release? The expansion's not really what's fixing a lot of the problems from the initial release. They patched in quite a few of the issues people have been having. I mean, not really. There's still a lot of core problems with the game's design and its gear. They're working on it. They are working on it, and I do have faith that it'll get better over time. It's just that I don't think it's going to see like widespread fixing, not for a while yet. But the game was profitable. Didn't get great scores, but that didn't stop it from being profitable and from being played a lot. I just question how it'll go, how it'll work into the future. You know, how big will Destiny be when Destiny 2 comes out? Will it be a better game? Will it vastly improve on the first one? It won't be on the last gen system, so there actually is a chance that it will be a major improvement. And are they getting better at designing encounters? Like, is the Dark Below's raid boss going to be a better encounter? Is it not going to be super cheesable? Are they going to have adequately tested it? There's a lot of things that can go into it. I have hope for them, though, and I'm glad to see that they are working on the problems, and I would hopefully want to pick up the expansion, but I don't think I will. Sorry. Alright, this is going to be the final question that I answer for this week, and I feel like I've answered it before, but I found it like 5 times in the comment section, so I'm just going to answer like a general question here. I'm going to, let's see. Here, this is one, but I found it like in a bunch of other places, so this is the one on the screen. You talked about Square adding summons in 3.0, but do you think they will add a dragon like in 11 for Dragoon to buff them? No. That would be a terrible idea. First of all, the Wyvern would probably make the Dragoon weaker overall, because they wouldn't just give them a pet and be like, oh, well, here's some damage. Here's a pet that just does its own damage. You don't gotta worry about it or anything. To take a melee DPS job and then turn it into a melee pet job, that is a major transition that is not worth doing. Also, the lore doesn't make sense. They've been at war with dragons for 1,000 years. They're not just gonna all of a sudden be like, oh yeah, we have this little dragon pet that I love and it's my companion, like it was in 11. That's not gonna happen. It's not a good idea. It's a terrible idea. They shouldn't do it. I hope they don't do it. If they do it, I hope it's like a temporary thing. I hope it's like they summon like a dragon pet for like 20 seconds. They mind control a dragon or something. No, see, even that sounds... No, just don't do it. Just don't do it at all, please. The Alligans did that. I'll make a video about it, but no, I don't want to see it. It's my apologies if I sound rude. I don't think they should do that, and I don't think they will. But anyway, guys, those are all the questions I'm going to answer for this week. I got to get working on some other videos, so I got to get this out to you guys right now. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and ask your questions for next week in the comment section of the video below. Remember, if I didn't answer a question, say that I asked this... Well, I guess you'd have to really prove that you did it. I asked this last week, or I asked this in week 12, or in week 9, or whatever. Just say that you've asked the question before and that I haven't answered it yet, and I'll try my best to get to those questions on the next video. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.